Day 196, Exile, Isaiah 9-10, Tobit 10-12, Proverbs 10 verses 9-12. Let's begin. Isaiah 9-10. Woe to those who make unfair laws, and who, when writing, write injustice. In order to oppress the poor in judgment, and to do violence to the case of the humble of my people, in order that widows may be their prey, and that they might plunder the orphan. What will you do on the day of visitation and calamity which is approaching from afar? To whom will you flee for assistance? And where will you leave behind your own glory? So that you may not be bowed down under the chains, and fall with the slain? Concerning all this, his fury was not turned away, instead, his hand was still extended. Woe to Assur! He is the rod and the staff of my fury, and my indignation is in their hands. I will send him to a deceitful nation, and I will order him against the people of my fury, so that he may take away the plunder, and tear apart the prey, and place it to be trampled like the mud of the streets. But he will not consider it to be so, and his heart will not suppose it to be this way. Instead, his heart will be set to crush and to exterminate more than a few nations. For he will say, Are not my princes like many kings? Is not Calno like Carchemish, and Hamath like Arpad? Is not Samaria like Damascus? In the same manner as my hand reached the kingdoms of the idol, so also will it reach their false images, those of Jerusalem and of Samaria. Should I not do to Jerusalem and her false images, just as I have done to Samaria and her idols? And this shall be, when the Lord will have completed each of his works on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, I will act against the fruit of the exalted heart of King Assur, and against the glory of the haughtiness of his eyes. For he has said, I have acted with the strength of my own hand, and I have understood with my own wisdom, and I have removed the limits of the people, and I have plundered their leaders, and like one with power, I have pulled down those residing on high. And my hand has reached to the strength of the people, as to a nest. And just as the eggs which have been left behind are gathered, so have I gathered the entire earth. And there was no one who moved a wing, or opened a mouth, or uttered a snarl. Should the axe glorify itself over him who wields it? Or can the saw exalt itself over him who pulls it? How can a rod lift itself up against him who wields it, or a staff exalt itself, though it is only wood? Because of this, the sovereign Lord, the Lord of hosts, will send leanness among his fat ones. And under the influence of his glory, a burning ardor will rage, like a consuming fire. And the light of Israel will be like a fire, and the Holy One of Israel will be like a flame. And his thorns and briars will be set ablaze and devoured, in one day. And the glory of his forest, and of his beautiful hill will be consumed, from the soul even to the flesh. And he will flee away in terror. And what remains of the trees of his forest will be so few, and so easily numbered, that even a child could write them down. And this shall be in that day, those not added to the remnant of Israel, and those who escape of the house of Jacob, will not lean upon him who strikes them. Instead, they will lean upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. The remnant of Jacob, again I say the remnant, will be converted to the mighty God. For though your people, O Israel, will be like the sand of the sea, yet only a remnant of them will be converted. The consummation, having been shortened, will be inundated with justice. For the Lord, the God of hosts, will accomplish an abbreviation and a consummation in the midst of all the earth. For this reason, the Lord, the God of hosts, says this, My people, who inhabit Zion, do not be afraid of Assur. He will strike you with his rod, and he will lift up his staff over you, on the way of Egypt. But after a little while and a brief time, my indignation will be consumed, and my fury will turn to their wickedness. And the Lord of hosts will raise up a scourge over him, like the scourge of Midian at the rock of Oreb, and he will raise up his rod over the sea, and he will lift it up against the way of Egypt. And this shall be in that day, his burden will be taken away from your shoulder, and his yoke will be taken away from your neck, and the yoke will decay at the appearance of the oil. He will approach Iath, he will cross into Migron, he will entrust his vessels to Michmash. They have passed through in haste, Geba is our seat, Ramah was stupefied, Gibeah of Saul fled. Nay, with your voice, daughter of Galim, pay attention, Lisha, impoverished woman of Anathoth. Madmenah has moved away, be strengthened, you inhabitants of Jebim. It is still daylight, so stand at Nob. He will shake his hand against the mountain of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. Behold, the sovereign Lord of hosts will crush the little bottle of wine with terror, and the exalted in stature will be cut down, and the lofty will be brought low. And the dense forest will be overturned with iron, and Lebanon, with its exalted ones, will fall. In the earlier time, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali were lifted up. But in the later time, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, the Galilee of the Gentiles, was weighed down. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. A light has risen for the inhabitants of the region of the shadow of death. You have increased the nation, but you have not increased the rejoicing. They will rejoice before you, like those who rejoice at the harvest, like the victorious exulting after capturing the prey, when they divide the spoils. For you have prevailed over the yoke of their burden, and over the rod of their shoulder, and over the scepter of their oppressor, as in the day of Midian. For every violent plunder with a tumult, and every garment mixed with blood, will be burned up and will become fuel for the fire. For unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given, and leadership is placed upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Father of the future age, Prince of Peace. His reign will be increased, and there will be no end to his peace. He will sit upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to confirm and strengthen it, in judgment and justice, from now even unto eternity. The zeal of the Lord of hosts shall accomplish this. The Lord sent a word to Jacob, and it fell upon Israel. And all the people of Ephraim will know it. And the inhabitants of Samaria will say it, in the arrogance and haughtiness of their heart. The bricks have fallen, but we will build with squared stones. They have cut down the sycamores, but we will replace them with cedars. And the Lord will raise up the enemies of Rezin over him, and he will turn his adversaries into a tumult. The Syrians from the east and the Philistines from the west. And they will devour Israel with their whole mouth. After all this, his fury was not turned away, instead, his hand was still extended. And the people did not return to the one who struck them, and they did not seek the Lord of hosts. And so, the Lord will disperse, away from Israel, the head and the tail, he who bows down and he who refrains, in one day. The long-lived and honorable, he is the head, and the prophet who teaches lies, he is the tail. And those who deceitfully praise this people, and those who are praised, will be thrown down violently. For this reason, the Lord will not rejoice over their youths. And he will not take pity on their orphans and widows. For each one is a hypocrite, and each one is wicked, and every mouth has spoken foolishness. After all this, his fury was not turned away, instead, his hand was still extended. For impiety has been kindled like a fire, it will devour briar and thorn, and it will burn in the dense forest, and it will be interwoven with the ascending smoke. The earth has been shaken by the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and the people will become like fuel for the fire. A man will not spare his own brother. And he will turn toward the right, and he will be hungry. And he will eat toward the left, and he will not be satisfied. Each one will eat the flesh of his own arm, Manasseh Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh, and together they will be against Judah. After all this, his fury was not turned away, instead, his hand was still extended. Tobit 10-12. In truth, when Tobias was delayed because of the marriage celebration, his father Tobit was worried, saying, "Why do you think my son is delayed, or why has he been detained there? Do you think that Gabael has died, and that no one will repay him the money?" And so he began to be exceedingly sad, both he and his wife Anna with him. And they both began to weep together, because their son did not at least return to them on the appointed day. But his mother wept inconsolable tears, and also said, "Woe, woe to me, O my son! Why did we send you to journey far away, you, the light of our eyes, the staff of our old age, the solace of our life, the hope of our posterity? Having all things together as one in you, we ought not to have dismissed you from us. And Tobit was saying to her, Be calm, and do not be troubled. Our son is safe. That man, with whom we sent him, is faithful enough. Yet she was by no means able to be consoled. But leaping up every day, she looked all round, and traveled around all the ways, by which there seemed any hope that he might return, so that she might possibly see him coming from afar. In truth, Raguel said to his son-in-law, Remain here, and I will send a message of your health to your father Tobit. And Tobias said to him, I know that my father and my mother have now counted the days, and their spirit must be tortured within them. And when Raguel had repeatedly petitioned Tobias, and he was by no means willing to listen to him, he delivered Sarah to him, and half of all his substance, with men and women servants, with sheep, camels, and cows, and with much money. And he dismissed him away, in safety and gladness, from him, saying, May the holy angel of the Lord be with your journey, and may he lead you through unharmed, and may you discover that all is right concerning your parents, and may my eyes see your sons before I die. And the parents, taking hold of their daughter, kissed her and let her go, admonishing her to honor her father-in-law, to love her husband, to guide the family, to govern the household, and to behave irreproachably herself. And as they were returning, they came through to Haran, which is in the middle of the journey, opposite Nineveh, on the 11th day. And the angel said, Brother Tobias, you know how you left behind your father. And so, if it pleases you, let us go on ahead, and let the family follow after us with a slower step, together with your bride, and with the animals. And since it pleased him to go on in this way, Raphael said to Tobias, Take with you from the gall of the fish, for it will be necessary. And so, Tobias took from its gall, and he went ahead. But Anna sat beside the way every day, on the top of a hill, from where she would be able to see for a long distance. And while she was watching for his arrival from that place, she looked far off, and soon she realized that her son was approaching. And running, she reported it to her husband, saying, Behold, your son arrives. And Raphael said to Tobias, As soon as you enter into your house, immediately adore the Lord your God. And giving thanks to him, approach your father, and kiss him. And immediately anoint his eyes from this gall of the fish, which you carry with you. For you should know that his eyes will soon be opened, and your father will see the light of heaven, and he will rejoice at the sight of you. Then the dog, which had been with them in the way, ran ahead, and arriving like a messenger, he showed his joy by fawning and wagging his tail. And rising up, his blind father began to run, stumbling with his feet. And giving his hand to a servant, he ran on to meet his son. And receiving him, he kissed him, as did his wife, and they both began to weep for joy. And when they had adored God and had given thanks, they sat down together. Then Tobias, taking from the gall of the fish, anointed his father's eyes. And about half an hour passed, and then a white film began to come out of his eyes, like the membrane of an egg. So, taking hold of it, Tobias pulled it away from his eyes, and immediately he received his sight. And they glorified God, Tobit especially, and his wife, and all those who knew him. And Tobit said, I bless you, O Lord God of Israel, because you have chastised me, and you have saved me, and behold, I see my son Tobias. And then, after 7 days, Sarah, the wife of his son, and all the family arrived safely, along with the sheep, and the camels, and much money from his wife, but also with that money which he had received from Gabael. And he explained to his parents all the benefits from God, which he had produced all around him, by means of the man who had led him. And then Ahikar and Nadab arrived, the maternal first cousins of Tobias, rejoicing for Tobias, and congratulating with him for all the good things that God had revealed all around him. And for 7 days they feasted, and all were rejoicing with great joy. Then Tobit called his son to him, and he said to him, What are we able to give to this holy man, who accompanied you? Tobias, answering, said to his father, Father, what wages shall we give him? And what could be worthy of his benefits? He led me and he brought me back safely. He received the money from Gabael. He caused me to have my wife. And he confined the demon away from her. He caused joy to her parents. myself, he rescued from being devoured by the fish. As for you, he also caused you to see the light of heaven. And so, we have been filled with all good things through him. What could we possibly give to him that would be worthy of these things? But I implore you, my Father, to ask him if he would perhaps deign to take for himself half of all the things that have been brought. And calling him, the Father especially, and the Son, they took him aside. And they began to petition him, so that he would deign to accept ownership of 1/2 part of all things that they had brought. Then he said to them privately, Bless the God of heaven, and confess to him in the sight of all who live, for he has acted in his mercy toward you. For it is good to conceal the secret of a king, just as it is also honorable to reveal and to confess the works of God. Prayer with fasting is good, and almsgiving is better than hiding away gold in storage. For almsgiving delivers from death, and the same is what purges sins and makes one able to find mercy and everlasting life. But those who commit sin and iniquity are enemies to their own soul. Therefore, I reveal the truth to you, and I will not hide the explanation from you. When you prayed with tears, and buried the dead, and left behind your dinner, and hid the dead by day in your house, and buried them by night, I offered your prayer to the Lord. And because you were acceptable to God, it was necessary for you to be tested by trials. And now, the Lord has sent me to cure you, and to free Sarah, your son's wife, from the demon. For I am the angel Raphael, one of 7, who stand before the Lord. And when they had heard these things, they were troubled, and being seized with fear, they fell upon the ground on their face. And the angel said to them, Peace be to you. Fear not. For when I was with you, I was there by the will of God. Bless him, and sing to him. Indeed, I seem to eat and drink with you, but I make use of an invisible food and drink, which cannot be seen by men. Therefore, it is time that I return to him who sent me. But as for you, bless God, and describe all his wonders. And when he had said these things, he was taken from their sight, and they were not able to see him any longer. Then, lying prostrate for 3 hours upon their face, they blessed God. And rising up, they described all his wonders. Proverbs 10 verses 9 through 12. He who walks in simplicity walks in confidence. But he who corrupts his ways shall be discovered. He who winks with the eye gives sorrow. And the foolish in lips shall be beaten. The mouth of the just is a vein of life. And the mouth of the impious covers iniquity. Hatred rises up from disputes. And charity covers all offenses.